Imagine for a second sneaking into an incredibly exclusive executive boardroom, like right in the middle of the luxury Kiowa Island golf resort.
Oh, that sounds pretty nice, actually.
Right. The air conditioning is just humming. It's got this massive, perfectly polished mahogany table. And right outside these huge floor-to-ceiling windows, you can see the manicured greens of a world-class golf course.
Yeah, it paints a really relaxing picture.
It does.
But the reality, though, is that literally nobody sitting around that table is thinking about their golf swing. I mean, they are looking at a total financial pressure cooker.
Oh, for sure.
What we are actually looking at is a masterclass in navigating high-stakes business growth in just a highly volatile environment.
Yeah, and we know this because we got our hands on a strategic briefing. It's an invitation, really, aimed squarely at the leaders of DSOs, which are dental support organizations.
Right.
And it reveals, like, this quiet panic in the industry. Basically, how do you survive when your labor costs are just skyrocketing, but insurance payouts are actually shrinking?
It's a massive squeeze.
Exactly. So the agenda for this gathering, which is titled The Intelligent DSO Series, Chapter 1, Financial Intelligence, and this is taking place May 18th through the 20th, it zeroes in on that exact survival strategy.
Yeah, it really does.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this source material goes way, way beyond basic healthcare administration. I mean, it outlines a literal blueprint for not collapsing under your own weight.
Well, the premise of the entire briefing really rests on understanding the current ecosystem that these leaders are operating in. Like, the text points to 3 very specific threats that are just squeezing the life out of operating margins right now.
Okay, walk us through those.
So first, you have severe reimbursement pressure. Second, relentlessly rising operating costs. And third, which is a big one, brutal labor constraints affecting performance.
Now, if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, why not just raise prices? You know? Like, if everything costs more, just charge more.
Right, the logical reaction.
Yeah, but here's the catch with that reimbursement pressure. These organizations, they don't operate in a free market where they can just print out new price tags whenever they want.
No, not at all.
They are bound by insurance fee schedules. So if an insurance provider decides, hey, we're only going to pay this fixed amount for a standard procedure, and that rate stays flat or even decreases, which happens for 3 years, your top-line revenue just hits a glass ceiling.
Which brings us to the second and third threats, right? Squeezing them from the bottom up.
Right.
Because while that top-line revenue is totally capped by insurance payers, the cost of, well, everything else is going up. Physical supplies, real estate leases, specialized medical equipment, all of it is climbing.
And the labor costs, too.
Exactly.
Right.
Simultaneously, the labor constraints are just forcing wages up. I mean, finding and retaining clinical staff right now is a complete bidding war.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you have a fixed ceiling on what you can actually earn per patient and a rapidly rising floor on what it costs to treat them. The profit margin in the middle is just evaporating.
It's completely vanishing. And in that environment, a DSO still has to somehow scale. Like, they have to acquire new practices, build out new clinics, upgrade facilities.
Right, which takes money.
Exactly, it requires capital. But I have to push back a little on how people usually think about this. The assumption is usually that raising capital is just a matter of grabbing cash.
Yeah, the grab cash mentality.
Right, like, hey, we need $10 million to acquire 5 new clinics, so let's just go get $10 million. But reading through this briefing, it really reminds me of building a house.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Because, you know, the materials matter, but the design dictates the actual stability.
Exactly the angle I was looking at. The capital is simply the bricks. You can have a massive pile of bricks just dumped on your empty lot. But if you don't have a flexible blueprint, those bricks are pretty much useless.
Yeah.
In fact, they become a massive liability. You don't just want bricks. You need a flexible blueprint so you aren't trapped if, costs suddenly change, or if you discover halfway through the build that the ground is sinking.
Right.
Right. If you just grab cash without a structured plan, you're literally trapped by your own resources.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the briefing explicitly warns against that exact grab cash mentality. The agenda addresses how to evaluate debt, equity, and alternative capital.
Okay.
And the critical distinction here is the shift from focusing on how to access capital to how to actually structure it intelligently.
Structure over access.
Yes. The text stresses that the wrong structure destroys your flexibility, and ultimately it erodes long-term enterprise value.
Hold on, though. I mean, Trading debt for equity just sounds like trading the bank for a venture capitalist. Aren't you just swapping like mandatory loan payments for an investor who's breathing down your neck wanting 20% year-over-year growth?
That's a fair point.
Can you explain the actual mechanics of why the structure matters more than just getting the check cleared?
Sure, it really comes down to how different types of capital behave under stress. So consider senior bank debt. It's often the cheapest money you can get, but it comes with really rigid covenants. The bank requires you to maintain a very specific debt service coverage ratio.
Right.
Now, if those reimbursement pressures we mentioned suddenly squeeze your cash flow and you dip below that ratio, the bank can declare a technical default. You could lose control of the business entirely.
Oh, wow. That is terrifying.
It is. Now, look at equity on the other side. You sell a chunk of the company to a private equity firm.
Right, giving up a piece of the pie.
Exactly. You don't have those mandatory monthly loan payments choking your cash flow anymore, which gives you breathing room. But you've diluted your ownership and you've given up future upside.
So you constantly have to weigh the immediate cash flow relief of equity against the long-term wealth destruction of just giving away your company.
Exactly. And then the briefing introduces alternative capital into the mix. Things like mezzanine financing or venture debt.
Mezzanine finance?
Yeah, think about mezzanine financing. It sits right between senior debt and equity. It's subordinate, meaning if things go under, the bank gets paid before the mezzanine lender does.
Okay, so higher risk for them.
Right. And to make up for taking on that extra risk, mezzanine financing carries a much higher interest rate, and it often includes warrants like a small piece of equity upside.
Got it.
It's incredibly expensive money, but it prevents massive ownership dilution while keeping the senior bank lenders happy.
Interesting.
So structuring capital intelligently means blending these three tools: senior debt, equity, and alternative capital. That way, if your operating costs spike next month, you have the operational agility to absorb the blow without triggering a default or, giving away the farm.
But here's the trap. Once you intelligently structure that capital, the money just kind of burns a hole in your pocket.
No, absolutely.
You have to deploy it to actually grow. And the most dangerous place a DSO can park that hard-fought capital right now is in clinical technology. Because the innovation cycle is just spinning totally out of control.
The source material issues a direct warning here. They focus heavily on clinical technology financing, specifically the fear of executives getting locked into systems.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the mechanics of buying a massive fleet of commercial jets.
Okay.
You spend hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire these planes. Then, like 6 months later, the Aviation Authority mandates a completely new, highly efficient fuel standard that your fleet cannot process.
Right.
Your planes are instantly obsolete, but you still owe the bank for them. Now, scale that dynamic to a massive DSO.
That's a great analogy.
You drop millions outfitting 50 clinics with state-of-the-art 3D imaging hardware. 18 months later, an entirely new AI-driven diagnostic software becomes the industry standard, and oops, it isn't compatible with your hardware.
Yeah, and then you are locked into a depreciating asset that actively hinders your clinical capabilities.
Exactly.
This is exactly why the briefing highlights a fundamental shift in mindset among leading organizations. They are no longer viewing technology simply as an equipment purchase.
What are they viewing it as then?
They evaluate it strictly as a strategic investment. The source actually provides a specific evaluation framework for the attendees, measuring technology through 4 distinct lenses.
Okay, what are the lenses?
Clinical relevance, provider attraction, patient experience, and enterprise value.
I want to stop on that second lens for a second, provider attraction.
Yeah, it's a huge one.
Because when you usually think of high-end medical equipment, you just assume the sole purpose is patient care or like clinical accuracy.
Right.
But this briefing evaluates technology fundamentally as a magnet to recruit top talent.
Yeah.
Walk me through the financial math of using medical hardware basically as an HR strategy.
Well, tie this back to the labor constraints we discussed at the top of the deep dive. Hiring a top-tier associate dentist is brutally difficult and very expensive right now.
Right.
A high-producing associate might generate well over $1 million a year in revenue for a clinic. If that dentist gets frustrated and leaves, you don't just lose their production. You spend tens of thousands of dollars on recruiting fees, and that specialized surgical chair sits completely empty, generating 0 revenue for months.
You are bleeding cash every single day that clinic is understaffed.
Exactly. Now, imagine 2 DSOs competing for that elite provider. DSO A forces them to use outdated, clunky practice management software and older 2D imaging.
Okay.
The dentist has to spend extra hours fighting the machinery and second-guessing their diagnoses. But DSOB, they have financed the absolute latest frictionless clinical technology.
Like what?
Like AI-assisted pathology detection that automatically highlights areas of concern and instantaneous 3D intraoral scanners. That dentist is obviously choosing DSOB.
Without a doubt.
Leasing that high-end AI scanner might cost the organization a few $1,000s a month, sure, but it retains the provider who generates $1 million a year.
Yeah.
The technology basically pays for itself purely through talent retention.
That completely flips the script.
Yeah.
You are buying the cutting-edge imaging machine, not just because it takes a better picture of a tooth, but because the dentist who knows how to use it will straight up refuse to work for a clinic that doesn't have it.
Exactly.
The technology is a defensive moat around your labor force.
And that defensive moat drives the fourth lens we mentioned, enterprise value.
How so?
Well, if your technology attracts the best clinicians, those clinicians produce better patient outcomes and higher volume. The clinics hit their targets, the debt service is covered, and the overall valuation of the corporate structure skyrockets.
Right.
But you still face that timing issue. You have to finance those upgrades on a flexible cycle so you don't get trapped when the innovation wheel turns again.
Which means we are looking at an incredibly delicate high-wire act here. You have to perfectly balance your capital structure blending that mezzanine debt and equity to protect your cash flow, while simultaneously deploying that capital into volatile technology investments just to keep your best doctors from quitting.
It's a lot to manage.
It is. And to pull off a maneuver that complex across hundreds of locations, you cannot afford to be blind.
No, you can't.
Which brings us to the final agenda item of the Kiowa Island briefing: data-driven financial intelligence. So what does this all mean? Why does everything hinge on the data?
Because without absolute clarity into your operational metrics, the decisions on capital and technology are just blind guesses. The source pushes these leaders to entirely abandon backward-looking reporting in favor of predictive and actionable decision-making.
Right, because operating a multi-million-dollar corporate structure on backward-looking data is literally like trying to navigate a massive supertanker by leaning over the back railing and staring at the ship's wake.
Yeah, that won't end well.
The wake tells you exactly how fast you were going and what direction you were heading 10 minutes ago. It tells you absolutely nothing about the massive coral reef sitting 100 yards off your bow right now.
And that's a fatal delay in an industry with shrinking margins. What's fascinating here is the source material's specific diagnosis of the problem.
What do they call it?
It points to administrative friction and administrative drag.
Okay, break down the mechanics of administrative drag for me.
Yeah.
How does a clunky workflow actually sink a whole business?
Look at revenue cycle management, or RCM. In a fragmented DSO, you might have 50 different clinics using localized manual billing processes, tracking their claims on totally disparate spreadsheets.
Sound like a nightmare.
It is. Now, if a major insurance payer suddenly changes a coding requirement, and it takes your decentralized billing team 45 days to compile all those spreadsheets, identify the spike in claim denials, and report it to the executive suite, you have just bled massive amounts of cash for a month and a half.
Wow.
That is administrative drag.
You essentially sailed the ship right into the reef because the guy watching the radar had to mail you a letter to tell you about it.
Exactly. But by reducing that friction, by centralizing the RCM into a single cloud-based platform that offers real-time dashboarding, you get actionable visibility.
So no more waiting.
Right. You don't wait 45 days to see the denials. The system flags the coding error on Tuesday afternoon. You fix the workflow by Wednesday morning.
That's incredible.
You preserve the cash flow, which ensures you hit the bank's debt service coverage ratio, which keeps you out of default. The text makes a really definitive statement here. It says, achieving this level of financial intelligence is no longer an operational luxury. It is a major source of competitive advantage.
Because the organization that possesses predictive data can just completely outmaneuver the organization still staring at its wake.
Every single time.
They can spot a cash flow dip, restructure their alternative capital before a crisis hits, buy the right technology on a flexible lease, and literally poach the best clinicians before the competition even realizes the market has shifted.
You've just synthesized the ultimate promise of this executive forum. Attendees are being offered a very specific survival kit.
Yeah, so let's lay out the practical takeaways promised to those executives around that mahogany table. First, they gain a highly sophisticated understanding of capital structure.
Right.
Learning how to blend senior debt, mezzanine financing, and equity to shield their enterprise value against relentless operating costs.
Second, they receive a strategic evaluation framework for clinical technology, moving past the old idea of just buying equipment and instead leveraging high-end tools specifically for provider attraction and retention.
Right. And third, they get a roadmap for clearing out administrative drag, breaking down those spreadsheet silos to achieve real-time predictive visibility into their cash flow.
And finally, the invaluable peer-level insight that really only comes from debating these mechanics with other leaders who are also attempting to stay scalable and financially disciplined.
That's crucial.
The stated goal concluding the source text is very clear. It's to build a more resilient and intelligent DSO platform.
It really is an intense masterclass in corporate survival. But, as we wrap up this analysis, there is a lingering tension in this material that warrants some thought on your own.
Oh, absolutely.
We spent significant time unpacking how leading healthcare organizations are evaluating cutting-edge clinical technology like AI diagnostics, 3D scanners, primarily through the corporate lenses of provider attraction and enterprise value.
Yeah.
They're essentially using medical devices as financial levers and HR retention tools.
Which naturally raises an important question about the downstream effects of that strategy.
Precisely. If the driving force behind purchasing a $1 million piece of medical equipment is fundamentally about protecting the corporate bottom line and keeping an employee happy, how does that shift the dynamic between the clinician, their corporate employer, and you, the patient sitting in the chair?
It's a great point.
Does treating medical technology as a strategic financial asset risk prioritizing corporate leverage over personalized care? It's a really complex tension at the very heart of modern healthcare administration.
Definitely a vital dynamic to watch as the push for scale continues to completely reshape the industry.
Thank you for joining us today as we pulled back the curtain on the high-stakes boardroom of the intelligent DSO. Keep questioning the unseen structures operating around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.